This is the super rare and never before seen bearded dragon. G'day, and welcome to the first episode of our Into the Wild series. What we're going to be doing in this series is we're going to talk about where my animals normally come from in the wild. We're going to talk about their ecology. We're going to talk about how I got them, things like that. In our first episode, we're going to be talking about Australian reptiles. We're going to be talking about critters from down under. So I was actually in Australia for a summer. I interned at the National Zoo in Canberra, and I was actually there during their winter though, so that all the reptiles were hibernating because it was about 30 to 40 degrees during the day. Now also while I was in Australia, not only did I work at the National Zoo, but I actually volunteered on my days off at the local reptile zoo in Canberra, and I got to work with a lot of reptiles from Australia that we don't really see over here in the States, either because they're very, very expensive or they're really not kept in the captive pet trade. I got to work with things like shingleback skinks, freshwater crocodiles, lace monitors, big scrub pythons. So Australia really doesn't allow the export or import of animals into their country, whether native or exotic, except for I think very, very extreme circumstances, which are probably just for zoos. They do this because Australia's basically just been ravaged by invasive species. They have fox and rabbits and camels and mice and rats and cane toads and a bunch of other types of invasive animals that are just absolutely decimating wild populations. What we have over here is just from breeding populations that were already outside of the country when they enacted the law. So you basically got common ones like bearded dragons, blue-tongued skinks, the kind of more uncommon ones but are still out there if you look for them, like olive pythons, Australian water dragons. Then you've got ones that used to be really expensive but are slowly coming down in price as breeding kind of goes up, so like lace monitors, diamond pythons. And then you've got ones that really no one over here is dealing with, so you've got like freshwater crocodiles, and shingleback skinks are very rarely bred. And Aussie wildlife is infamous for, oh, it's all trying out to get you. If you step foot in the bush out there, something's gonna try and kill you, which is a bit of a hyperbole. Australia has basically over 170 or so around there snake species, and over 100 of those are some kind of venomous. And of those 100 plus venomous snakes, only about a dozen, maybe dozen and a half snake species actually have the venom to kill a human. The most venomous, of course, being the inland taipan. Australia also has the most dangerous, largest crocodile, which is the saltwater crocodile. It has the most dangerous bird, the cassowary. It has the most dangerous octopus. It has the most dangerous jellyfish. Basically, if someone asks what's the deadliest blank, good bet it's probably from Australia. Now saying that, there's a whole bunch of spider species and other things in Australia that aren't going to try and kill you. Australia is actually the main home base for a really cool group of mammals called marsupials, like kangaroos, wallabies, koalas. Over here we only have one marsupial, and that's the opossum, which a lot of people actually just view as a pest. They're also the only place on the planet that you're going to find monotremes, which are egg-laying mammals, so things like platypus and echidna. I absolutely loved my time in Australia. I loved the animals. I loved all the cool reptiles that you get to work with and you don't really get to see over here. And I get asked a good bit why I don't just move there to do what I do there. The problem is in Australia, you can only keep Australian reptiles. You don't get to have exotics. And by exotics, I mean things like corn snakes, leopard geckos, things we can find at a pet store here in the States for 20 bucks. Over there, they're on the black market for crazy prices. Now, a lot of these animals we're talking about are going to be preyed upon by things like quolls, which is a predator they have over there. It's like the size of a cat. Dingoes, larger reptiles like monitor lizards, or goannas as they call them over there. Birds of prey. So let's get into the Aussie reptiles, and the first one is going to be one I think a lot of you know. This is the super rare and never before seen bearded dragon. I'm just kidding. You can go to just about any pet store and see a bearded dragon. They're the most popular pet reptiles on the planet. The species was first described relatively recently for a lot of animals, and this was 1926. Now there are 8 species of bearded dragon, and they are found just about all across Australia. Now the ones that you typically see over here in captivity are central bearded dragons, which in the wild are found right in the heart of Australia, which is the outback. You'll find them in Queensland, you'll find them in New South Wales, the Northern Territory. Now you'll find them in a lot of dry, hot regions, so semi-arid forests, rocky deserts, savanna grasslands. Now they're typically 16 to 20 inches in length. They're not a huge lizard. They usually have a kind of rough, scaly back and then a smooth underbelly that's also usually lighter in coloration. The back is usually darker to help with camouflage. There are a ton of these guys in captivity, a bunch of different kinds of morphs. They get in pretty crazy colors. There are also some kind of variations on bearded dragons that are called silkies and leatherbacks. Leatherbacks are basically bred to have kind of a less bumpy back. Their back's a lot smoother than bearded dragons typically are, but it's not an unnatural thing. Silkies, on the other hand, are an unnatural scaleless morph. It's a very, very smooth back. You can't keep them like a normal bearded dragon or a leatherback. You have to be very careful with them, and I highly recommend staying away from them. Beardies are omnivores, so they're going to eat vegetation and bugs. So in captivity, you give them a salad, and you also give them like crickets, mealworms, roaches, things like that. Now, they're not a very scary animal as far as a lot of Australian wildlife goes. So when they get scared by a predator, they're going to change the color of their beard. They can turn it dark, dark black. They're going to puff it up, going to push that out and show off kind of all the spikes and everything, try and look big, mean, and tough. And they're going to hiss, and they're going to try and act like they're a bigger, more threatening thing than they actually are. One of these infamously bit Steve Irwin right on the nose when he was laying on the ground looking at it. Like I said, I get a lot of bearded dragons surrendered to me because despite them making good pets and despite them being the most popular pet reptile on the planet, a lot of people will get them and not realize what they're getting into. Now I have 3 permanent bearded dragons. Gandalf is my newest one. It is an adult leatherback bearded dragon. So like I said, smoother back, but still you can keep it just like a regular bearded dragon. Now Gandalf is a female, and when I got her, she was absolutely covered in stuck shed. She had so much dark brown skin stuck on her entire body. And now you can see she's a very, very light color because I got a lot of that off. So this is Blackbeard. He's kind of like my old man. Bearded dragons typically live to be 9 or 10 years old, sometimes 12. I have heard of them living longer than that. Blackbeard here is at least 9, and he had a pretty rough life before he came to me. Now I got Blackbeard from a friend of mine that used to do reptile rescue. Now when she got Blackbeard in, he actually came with another bearded dragon he had been living with, and the problem was the original owner saw that the pet store had a whole bunch of bearded dragons in together, and she thought that was okay. But the problem is, as they get bigger, things can happen like fights. So the other bearded dragon actually attacked and injured his leg. So when they took it to the vet, it was so injured the vet just straight removed the leg, so now he's a little peg leg bearded dragon, which is where he gets the name Blackbeard. And he gets along just fine without it. When he came into my friend, he was really, really skinny. He was emaciated. He had really bad eye infections, which I'm pretty sure is from the lack of right UV lighting. So he's kind of like my old crippled grandpa. Now this is Merlin. Merlin's my youngin'. He's only about 2 years old. And when I got Merlin, the girl that I got him from was giving him a good home and was doing everything right except for one thing. Now when you have a bearded dragon, it needs it pretty hot and it also needs UV lighting. Now you can give a bearded dragon that UV lighting, but if you don't give it a basking spot to get in range of that UV lighting and get the heat it needs, problems can happen. Now one big problem associated with UV lighting and the lack of it is metabolic bone disease, where the bones can grow improperly, they can grow really brittle, and you can just get some deformations from it. And that's why Merlin sits like this with his tail up and his back legs kind of flayed out at that weird angle. He can't really move very well. When he moves, he kind of pulls himself along with his front legs. So when I got Merlin, he was about 13 grams, which is really small for a 6th or 7th month old bearded dragon. And it doesn't hurt him or anything like that. It's just something he's adapted to. So that's bearded dragons. Not just the most popular pet Aussie reptile, but the most popular pet reptile on the planet probably. So why don't we talk about something a little more unique? We have the black-headed python, which is very uncommon in captive collections. Now this species was first described in 1864. There are no subspecies, but they're a close cousin of the Woma python. And they live in northern Australia, basically from coast to coast, right across that northern edge. Now they get anywhere from 5 to 10 feet. They have that stunning black head and this gorgeous tiger striping down the back. It's usually black with yellow or cream colored. Now they have a kind of peculiar head shape compared to most pythons, and that helps with burrowing. Now unlike a lot of snakes, they're actually primarily reptile eaters. They eat a lot of lizards and snakes. They will sometimes eat rodents and birds if they need to. And they're also immune to some snake venom, so they'll eat a lot of venomous snakes as well. So they also like it really warm and dry, so you'll find them in a lot of scrublands, semi-arid woodlands, savanna grasslands. Now they use that black head like a solar panel. So in the morning when it's still pretty cold out, they're gonna stick that head outside their burrow or hidey hole, and that black head will absorb a ton of heat without them having to expose themselves. So they get warmed up to the right temperature without needing to sit out and bask like a lizard would. Now, like I said, these snakes are still fairly uncommon over here in the States. They used to be really expensive, but the price has been coming down. You can get a baby for $1,000 to $2,000, maybe a little more depending on the morph. Now, I used to have Cleo, who was a deformed baby that I got in from a breeder. She had a couple kinks in her spine, deformities from coming out of the egg. I got her for free from the breeder because he just wanted it to go to a good home and I would use it for education, but she was very, very sensitive because of her deformity. And unfortunately, she didn't make it. So he hooked me up with this one this year. It's got a scar on its back from where it cut its back coming out of the egg. She doesn't have a name yet because I've only had her for a little over a month, and I kind of like learning the personalities before I give animals names. And I absolutely love this species. They're such a gorgeous, awesome, unique snake. I'm very happy to have one. I can't So continuing with the trend of uncommon Australian snakes, this is the brown water python. These were first described very recently, 1983. There are no subspecies, but they're a close cousin of the olive python. They're found in northern Australia and very, very southern parts of Papua New Guinea. They get about 5 to 8 feet long, so it's a good medium-sized snake. And unfortunately, I think they're overlooked because they just don't really have any interesting patterning like a lot of Australian snake species do, like carpet pythons. But because of this patternless dark body, they reflect light like crazy. The iridescence off these scales is absolutely nuts. They are such a gorgeous snake. And it's because of this that this species is said to be the inspiration for the Aboriginal Dreamtime folklore tale of the rainbow serpent. The rainbow serpent is a deity that's very closely linked to water and life. It is believed that it lives in very deep, permanent bodies of water across Australia, and that years and millions of years ago, that a giant snake came down and slithered across Australia, and that's what created the rivers and the water systems across the continent. So not only is it an important snake culturally, but it's also a big snake in pop culture, because I'm 90% sure this is the snake species that bit Steve Irwin on the neck during that TV interview, and he just shrugged it off like, oh yeah, I'm sorry about that. No, can you zoom in on that? So rest in peace, Steve. The world didn't deserve you. Now, they'll feed on a variety of vertebrates in the wild. They're primarily mammal eaters, but they'll eat anything like rats, birds. They'll eat a lot of fish and lizards. They're primarily found in water systems like billabongs, rivers, lakes, ponds, but they've actually been found a long ways from water too in grasslands, especially during the dry season. So I actually got Olive from a breeder at the Rochester Reptile Expo, and we got talking for a while because I got to work with a lot of cool Australian snakes and reptiles, and he bred a bunch of them. So we got talking. I got to hold this one's mom, who is very, very big. So I just got super attached, and they're just such a cool, unique snake. I just really wanted one. I mean, you just don't really see a snake on this level of gorgeous in captivity.